Hello, and welcome to this lecture, the first lecture for Unit 2 on the context for the Protestant Reformation. So in this lecture, let's look at what's going on in Europe prior to 1517, the official beginning of the Protestant Reformation, and see what's going on in Europe. Some of this you already know, but we'll just review it just in case. So again, looking at the Catholic Church, like it was stated in last unit, the Catholic Church is the dominant power in Europe. They control not just religious authority across most of the European continent, besides small enclaves of European Jews, Muslims, and Eastern Orthodox Christians, which were kind of segmented in Russia or Greece or those parts of Europe. But the Catholic Church really did hold massive amounts of power across all of Europe. They not only had religious power, but secular power. They were a government. The papal states existed. The Pope had power over the monarchies of other European nations, and kingdoms across Europe had to, kind of pledge fealty to the Pope and to the Catholic Church. So Rome, the Catholic Church, is a major power. Rome controls lots of land, and they're technically a theocracy. You don't see theocracies too much in history, but this is definitely one example of one, a religious and a secular power kind of combined into one. And as the slide says there, 95% plus of Europe was Catholic, probably much higher than 95 maybe. But what's going on in Europe that kind of leads to some problems? One big issue that happens kind of at the beginning of this class, kind of in the late Middle Ages, that period we talked about at the beginning of Unit 1 last unit, is the Babylonian captivity. This is a period named after a part of the Bible I'm not too familiar with, but in this Babylonian captivity that happens in the 1300s, around the time of the bubonic plague and the Hundred Years' War, we see a dispute between the French kingdom and the Catholic Church. More or less, the French king that played a role in the Hundred Years' War decided that he wanted to elect his own pope and kind of move the Catholic Church to Avignon, France. He decides that's what he wants to do, so he does it. So we see the emergence of two papacies, one in Rome and one in France, and you can kind of see that discrepancy detailed below. This goes on for a number of years, 30, 40, 50 years, and eventually the situation gets so chaotic where there's these two dueling or competing popes that a third one is created to try and break the tie. Eventually, things resume after a number of years, and the papacy returns to Rome, and Avignon while it's still an important Catholic French city, it doesn't have a pope anymore after this movement. We do see, again, a successful kind of challenge to the Italian papacy and the Roman Catholic Church that people don't forget. They remember that the church was slightly weakened by this movement, by the king. So maybe it gives some leaders in Europe some ideas about what they could do. Another thing we see in this period is the corruption of the Catholic Church. A number of problems had arisen across the years. And again, this falls in line with what some of the Christian humanists like Erasmus had said, that the Catholic Church was corrupt. They were doing all these awful things. I've listed them there. Of course, we had illiterate priests, being drunk and preaching to their peasants in their village, not being celibate, gambling, misusing church funds, not even able to read the Bible in some cases. We have governments and kingdoms and kings and monarchs selling church positions for a profit. We have a corrupt city in Rome where there's lots of prostitution, lots of bad, sinful things going on in the capital city of the Roman Empire. And then most importantly, we see indulgences being sold. Indulgences were tickets out of purgatory, which if you're not sure, purgatory, if you're a Christian, if you're a Catholic, before you go to heaven, you might go to purgatory for a number of years, depending on the number of small sins that you committed. If you're a very sinful person, you would go to hell. But if you did a number of smaller things, you might sit in purgatory for 5, 10, 20, 100, 1,000, a million years, depending on what you did and depending on what the angels in heaven decided you deserved. Indulgences were sold to peasants and townspeople across Europe by the Catholic Church as get out of purgatory free cards or ways to shorten your stay in purgatory. So they were things that the church sold that would kind of absolve your sins. So this was really, really, really wanted and desired by lots of European peasants because they were again fearful of the afterlife. They had such a miserable time on earth for the most part that going to heaven was really wanted and desired. Eternity in heaven is really what they wanted. So anything they could give in this miserable life on earth to shorten their stay in purgatory, they would consider it. And the Catholic Church raised tons of money by selling these indulgences. We'll talk more about that in the next lecture because it's kind of the final breaking straw for someone named Martin Luther. One last thing that is going on here is pluralism, and that's the idea that you can hold multiple church offices and maybe sell them to get more money. If you're a bishop, maybe you're the bishop of multiple parishes and things like that. The more of those positions that you hold, the more money you can obtain and the richer you can get. We also see these new monarchies that we talked about last year to get stronger and stronger. And as they get stronger, they're more likely to challenge the Catholic Church. That's kind of the case with what happened in France in the Babylonian captivity, even though that kind of predates this idea of the new monarchy. But we see these ideas, these kingdoms in Europe grow and become stronger. And again, when they get stronger, they're able to kind of push away from the power of the Catholic Church and challenge them. Henry VIII does this, for example. We'll talk about him and the Anglican Protestant Reformation that goes on in England. With the Holy Roman Empire being a big defender of the Catholic Church, that they weaken, and that gives some of these German princes who maybe want to strike back at their emperor, and there's these strong nobles again that always like to challenge their monarch. That gives them a chance to kind of strike at the power of the emperor by maybe adopting a different religion, a different version of Christianity that will gain followers and thus give them support against their boss, the Holy Roman Emperor. Reformers that we see in this period that aren't necessarily stated that you should be familiar with. We did talk about some of the Christian humanists like Erasmus and Thomas More, but just so you know, there they are again. Again, they believed that, on the humanist trend, they believed that Christianity was corrupted when it was tied to that corrupt Roman Empire and the dictatorship that followed from Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar. They believed that Christianity was more pure when it simply followed the teachings of Jesus Christ and the words that he spoke, that the apostles wrote down and made into the Bible. Christian humanists, kind of start this trend. Other people that aren't necessarily labeled as Christian humanists or humanists in general that did inspire the Reformation are also listed here. You have William of Ockham in England. He was for a separation of church and state, that religious power and secular power should be separate, and he believed that government should have limited powers, that they should be accountable and follow faith and reason, which these are ideas of the Enlightenment. We're still, 400 or 500 years from the Enlightenment, but he was kind of ahead of his time and maybe inspirational to some of those later people. He was labeled a heretic, though, for him daring to question the power and place of the church and the government and things like that. John Wycliffe as well was a Englishman who believed in similar ideas. Again, he was against the combination of church and state. He believed, and this is a really important idea for a lot of the Protestants, that just reading the Bible alone or Scripture alone or sola scriptura was enough. You did not have to do all these extra things such as going to church, tithing, following the teachings of the Pope and things like that in order to get into heaven. He translated the Bible into the vernacular, which is in this case English. Vernacular, again, just means local language rather than Latin, the language of academics and stuff at the time. And he believed that the church should limit its property. the Catholic Church was a massive landowner across Europe at this time, and that's gonna kind of stay the case for the next couple of centuries. That'll slowly fade as time goes on, but even today, the church owns tons of property across the world at this point, and they're still a major player in world affairs. So maybe that's something to think about as we kind of go through this unit. Just how effective was the Protestant Reformation at the end of the day? I'll let you kind of be the judge of that. His followers, he gained lots of followers. They were tortured and executed for their beliefs. I don't believe he was, though. He maybe escaped the death sentence and things like that. That is not the case, though, for our last early reformer, a man by the name of Jan Hus. He comes from what is the present-day Czechia, Czech Republic, that region, and he did a lot of really interesting things. And if he had a little bit more luck, he maybe would have survived. He's also, infamous for coming from the phrase "your goose is cooked," if you've heard of that. I got this from a former student last year, Eddie Perry. He mentioned this, and it's what I saw as well. Hus, in I don't know if it's German or a Czech language or something like that. It means goose. So his name is John Goose, I guess, in English. But Jan Hus had his goose cooked, so to speak, in terms of what happened to him. So let's look and see what happened with him. So in what was called Bohemia back then, in that part of Europe, which again is like present-day Czech Republic, Czechia, we see Jan Hus kind of called for similar things that all these other people called for. He denied the authority of the Pope. He said that the Bible alone is important. He called for a Czech translation of the Bible into their local languages. He attacked indulgences, and he opposed the power and corruption with the Catholic Church. He gained a massive number of followers, and they were not backing down. Despite the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope trying to invade this region and put it down, they were unsuccessful. And honestly, his followers are going to remain pretty loyal to his ideas up until parts of the 30 Years' War in the early 1600s. So he's gonna be really popular. So we see actually the Catholic Church kind of throw in the towel a little bit and recognize this Hussite church that's linked to Jan Hus's ideas in 1430. So what they do is they were holding a council to kind of discuss some of the challenges to the church, the Council of Constance, and he was given safe passage to travel to this council to kind of give some feedback to the church and discuss some of the ideas associated with his beliefs. The Holy Roman Emperor gave him safe passage to travel and to kind of discuss his ideas. When this is also the same council where they talk about the Babylonian captivity and discuss going back to one pope, going from 3 to 1 popes. However, when Jan Hus arrives there, he's pretty much instantly captured by the papacy, charged with being a heretic, stirring up religious trouble, and he is burnt at the stake, as you can see right here. So his goose was indeed cooked. So Jan Hus, he's linked with Czech nationalism. He becomes a really early figure in that fight, even though, again, nationalism is still centuries away. But his movement does not die out. They stay intact for 100 or so years into the 1500s. When the Reformation gets going after 1517, this reignites some of those religious tensions in the region, and they kind of stay ignited until the 30 Years' War. Which starts as a heavily religious conflict, again, between Protestants and Catholics. So Jan Hus, maybe if he was born in slightly different circumstances, we would know him instead of Martin Luther, but nevertheless, that is not the case. And just as reference, here's kind of Europe at the time. Bohemia, or the Czech region I was talking about here, is over here. Doesn't necessarily line up with where modern day Czechia is. I believe it's maybe a little different there, but that's kind of the region that we kind of associate with Jan Hus. Nevertheless, with all these developments and circumstances, after Jan Hus, who's again pictured here, unfortunately being burnt alive, and here and in the background, very popular guy in European woodcuts. The church is still associated with state power. There's still a theocracy that controls secular governments, but also religious law. Rome is still very important in European society. Europeans are still donating large sums of money to the Catholic Church through indulgences, through tithing, through things like that. They pay very little taxes. They paid very little for protection, and only a few Christian humanists and regular humanists are criticizing them. And that all changes in 1517, and we'll talk about that in our next lecture. All right, thanks for listening. I'll catch you later.